you for joining us for today's webinar about the Critical Minerals Infrastructure Fund Indigenous Grants. My name is Catherine Lupton, and I'm a Senior Advisor at Natural Resources Canada's Minerals Programs branch. I'll be helping to moderate the discussion today. This session will be led by my colleagues Cody DeVoe, Deputy Director, and Jeff Schemmel, Policy Analyst in the Infrastructure and Regional Strategies Division. I'd like to acknowledge that I'm joining you from the traditional unceded territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe people, where I have the privilege to live and work. In recognition that we're joining from various traditional territories from coast to coast to coast, we invite you to take this moment to acknowledge and reflect on the traditional territories from which you're joining today. Okay, first, some quick housekeeping. Just so you're aware, we've disabled the mute buttons and cameras for the presentation just to avoid technical issues and allow everyone to focus on the presentation. If you're joining online, feel free to ask questions using the Q&A function, which is different from the chat function. If you're joining online, you'll see the little conversation bubbles at the top of your window that you can click to open the Q&A. And questions entered there will be addressed at the end of the presentation. Alternatively, you can save your questions and ask them at the end when we'll have the mics turned on for the question period. If you've dialed in to join the session, you can also ask questions during the Q&A period by pressing *5 to raise and lower your hand and *6 to unmute and mute your microphone. The presentation will also be shared with all the registered participants following the webinar. I'm now going to turn things over to Cody, who will walk us through the agenda.
Good afternoon. As Catherine mentioned, my name is Cody DeVoe, and I'm joining from Sault Ste. Marie, Ontario, located in Robinson-Huron Treaty Territory, in the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe. We have designed today's session with the hopes that it will provide useful, practical information. During today's webinar, we will provide an overview of the Indigenous grants associated with the Critical Minerals Infrastructure Fund, also called CMIF, details on the current call for proposals, how to apply, and how applications will be reviewed, information about grant agreements and reporting requirements, and we will save as much time as possible for questions and answers, so please note any questions you may have throughout the initial presentation. We will start by sharing background on the CMIF Indigenous grant. Canada's critical minerals sector has tremendous opportunities. However, some remain underdeveloped, including due to a lack of mine-enabling infrastructure. In Budget 2022, the federal government committed up to $1.5 billion until 2030 for infrastructure investments to support the development of critical minerals. These infrastructure investments will specifically target clean energy and transportation projects. Recognizing that many critical minerals deposits are found on or near Indigenous territory, the CMIF Indigenous grants have been set up to support Indigenous participation in discussions related to clean energy and transportation infrastructure projects linked to the development of critical minerals. Natural Resources Canada has set aside up to $13.5 million over 7 years to advance this important work. While CMIF Indigenous grants must be anchored to critical minerals infrastructure projects, we want to be clear that funding will not be considered an indication of consent for potential development. The grant funding is intended to support Indigenous organizations and communities to participate in or engage on potential projects. To be considered eligible for CMIF Indigenous grants funding, projects must intend to advance Indigenous participation in processes related to infrastructure development required to enable the expansion of critical minerals through activities that we've grouped into 3 themes: engagement, capacity building, and knowledge gathering and sharing. We will discuss eligible activities momentarily, but it's important to note that grant funding may be used to target broader regional discussions about impacts related to one or more critical minerals infrastructure projects, specifically clean energy or transportation. To meet this criteria, the mining project will need to be producing at least 50% critical minerals relative to other minerals being produced at the mine. Canada's critical minerals list can be found on the Natural Resources Canada website. A link will also be provided at the end of this presentation. In addition, the mining project will also need to involve the potential development of a clean energy or transportation infrastructure component that will enable the expansion of critical minerals. This infrastructure can either be at a pre-construction or shovel-ready state and be regional or mine site specific in scope. Clean energy infrastructure includes those which generate, store, or transmit electricity from a non-emitting source such as hydro, solar, wind, nuclear, and geothermal energy. It may also include renewable or alternative energy technologies, battery storage projects, and electrical vehicle charging stations for mining equipment. Transportation infrastructure includes fixed installations, structures, and networks that provide a framework for the movement of people, commodities, and goods. This may include roads, bridges, rail, ports, and other assets. The infrastructure should support the upstream portion of the critical mineral supply chain, meaning at the mining extraction phase rather than processing or manufacturing. Please note that CMIF support is intended to target enabling infrastructure for critical minerals development, but will not fund mine construction itself. Now, who is eligible to apply for the CMIF Indigenous grants? Eligible recipients include Indigenous entities such as communities, governments, national and regional councils, tribal councils or organizations, and Indigenous not-for-profit and for-profit organizations. To be considered an Indigenous organization under the CMIF, the organization must be at least 51% owned and led by Indigenous communities or peoples. Non-Indigenous entities may also apply, but will need to be working with or on behalf of an endorsing Indigenous partner. These entities may include governments, including their departments and agencies, provincial crown corporations, utilities, and certain port authorities, academic and research institutions, in addition to not-for-profit organizations legally registered in Canada. Non-Indigenous applicants are required to provide a letter of endorsement from their Indigenous partner organization to be considered eligible for grant funding. Indigenous partner organizations have the right to withdraw their support from non-Indigenous entities at any time during their partnership, and may work with Natural Resources Canada staff to find alternative solutions to ensure project success. Recognizing the higher cost of activities in northern and remote areas, the CMIF Indigenous grants have been designed to include a funding escalator for these communities. For this first call for proposals, individual communities are eligible to receive up to $50,000 per project, with those located in northern and remote areas eligible for up to $75,000. Organizations representing multiple communities are eligible to receive up to $100,000, with those located in northern and remote areas eligible for up to $150,000. Representative organizations can include those linked by cultural or linguistic background, geographic area, or treaty and comprehensive land claim boundaries, such as tribal councils, treaty and land claim organizations, and regional, provincial, territorial, and national level organizations. Regardless of the applicant type, grant funding may cover up to 100% of eligible project costs. However, grant funding will not cover expenses that another government organization is already funding. Natural Resources Canada staff will refer to several definitions to determine if an applicant should be considered northern or remote. Northern will be defined as all communities located in the Yukon, Northwest Territories, Inuvialuit, Nunavut, Nunavik, and Nunatsiavut. The definition of remote will include communities that are not connected to the broader critical infrastructure networks, such as the electrical grid, highway system, or natural gas networks. Communities that lack year-round surface transportation and have a year-round population according to the national census. Communities that are either located a long distance from larger settlements or lack transportation links that are typical in more populated areas. And communities that receive infrequent postal services, as shown on the postal codes of remote areas table on the Canada Post website. As definitions vary, applicants are asked to self-assess whether they are remote based on available information. Non-Indigenous applicants will be considered for the funding escalator based on the location of their Indigenous partner organization, with the information taken from the letter of endorsement provided with their application. I would now like to invite my colleague Jeff to present the next slides.
Thanks, Cody. My name's Jeff Schemmel, and I'm joining from the traditional and unceded territory of the Syilx people here in the South Okanagan region of British Columbia. The parameters of the grants allow applicants to also seek additional sources of funding for their projects, known in government circles as stacking. Applicants will be required to disclose all anticipated sources of funding in their application, including in-kind, non-cash contributions of goods and services provided by their organization, such as use of meeting room facilities free of charge or internal staff support. Funding from other sources may not exceed 100% of total eligible expenditures. If total funding from all sources is above the total eligible expenditures, Natural Resources Canada staff will adjust the amount of grant funding provided so this limit is not exceeded. It's also strongly recommended that applicants confirm funds being contributed from other sources before submitting their application, as Natural Resources Canada staff will need to confirm this as part of the application review process. The application form contains subcategories for all 3 types of eligible activities, and applicants will simply need to check off which of the subcategories will be included in their project. For engagement, this will include attending meetings, hosting or participating in Indigenous ceremonies, and providing input into assessments or accommodation measures. For capacity building, this will include education, training, and skills development, and hiring or contracting personnel to support engagement processes. For knowledge gathering and sharing, this will include publishing reports or studies, hosting in-person or virtual information sessions, and other knowledge gathering or sharing activities, such as incorporating Indigenous knowledge into engagement processes. Applicants are welcome to select more than one of the subcategories for their project, but will need to provide performance information for each of the activities undertaken through their project. This will include a brief report at the end of the project to highlight the outcomes attained, and Natural Resources Canada staff will assist with recipients with meeting this requirement. Let's turn now to the types of activities that may be eligible for grant funding. First, are the activities you're looking to undertake linked to one or more existing or potential critical minerals mines? A deposit must be made up of more than 50% critical minerals, as defined by Canada's Critical Minerals List. An increase in production should also be expected at the mine. Second, are your proposed activities linked to one or more clean energy or transportation projects that will enable critical minerals development? The clean energy or transportation project must increase production of an existing mine or lead to the extraction of minerals from a new deposit. Finally, are your activities related to one or more of these 3 categories: engagement, capacity building, or knowledge gathering and sharing? If you can answer yes to these 3 questions, your proposal may be eligible for grant funding. An optional expression of interest can be submitted to allow staff to determine whether a project aligns with basic eligibility requirements and CMIF objectives prior to submitting an application. Both the expression of interest and application forms are included on the website. This slide highlights a series of cases that would be a good fit for CMIF Indigenous grant funding. The first example shows a nickel mine in pre-development. The mining company is looking to install an access road to support future mining activities. In this example, a nearby First Nation Regional Council applies for funding to conduct a community-led environmental impact study to help inform the feasibility of development. In the next example, say there's a mine in the production phase that produces 75% copper and 25% gold. This meets the first criteria. Looking across the row to the next criteria, in this case, there's a proposal to develop transmission line infrastructure to connect the project to the electricity grid. Next in this example, a regional Inuit organization applies for funding to organize engagement sessions with the proponent and communities to identify potential impacts to Inuit harvesting practices. This may include some engagement and capacity building activities, which would be eligible. In the last example, we have a lithium mine that is looking to expand to a new deposit via a new access road and transmission line infrastructure. In this case, a Métis community could apply for grant funding to hire a consultant to help determine how they would like to participate in the project. There are many eligible costs. I will not go through all of them, but I do want to highlight a few, including honoraria for elders and ceremonial costs, including cultural gifts for meeting participants, salaries and benefits for employees, noting that this is only for time spent on the project. So if an employee works half-time on activities related to the project and half-time on other activities, CMIF Indigenous grants could fund up to half of that employee's salary and benefits. Expenditures related to training, including fees paid to trainers and stipends for non-salaried training participants. This also includes related costs such as living expenses, childcare, and other costs incurred while training and in transit to training. Travel expenses, including transportation, accommodations, meals, and allowances based on National Joint Council rates. Professional, legal, and technical services, such as the hiring of consultants to support engagement processes, and rental of facilities, transportation, and equipment necessary for engagement activities. Overhead is also eligible, up to a maximum of 15% of total eligible expenditures. Non-eligible costs include capital expenditures, costs for construction, lost income, renovation of buildings, and legal fees related to litigation or similar legal actions. I will now pass the floor back to Cody to speak about the current call for proposals.
Thanks, Jeff. For the first CMIF Indigenous Grants call for proposals, up to $3.5 million is available in total. Details about the grants and the application materials are available online at the CMIF Indigenous Grants webpage. Applications will be accepted until December 31st, 2024, or until all the funding for this call for proposals has been allocated. Applications will be considered on a first-come, first-assessed basis. All project activities will need to be completed by March 31st, 2026. The application process is designed to be as seamless as possible. The application form or expression of interest can be downloaded from the webpage, and applicants will need to input project information in the required fields. The CMIF Grants team will also be available to assist applicants with questions throughout the application process. Once the application form is completed, it can be submitted to Natural Resources Canada staff via the CMIF Indigenous Grants email address, which you can find on this slide and also on the webpage. Once your application or expression of interest has been submitted, you will receive an email confirming that it is under review. Expressions of interest will be reviewed to determine eligibility and to provide guidance on which aspects need to be developed further before it can proceed to the application phase. Applications will be reviewed and consulted with different teams within Natural Resources Canada and other federal departments as appropriate. We will assess applications in two phases. First, we will do an initial screening. If the application meets the initial screening criteria, we will undertake a full review. The initial screening process will involve confirming that the project is associated with an eligible critical minerals infrastructure project, was submitted by an eligible recipient, contains eligible activities, contains a budget that aligns with the funding level for the particular applicant type, and that the application attestations and declarations are signed. Applications will also need to contain sufficient project performance and risk mitigation information, and staff from Natural Resources Canada can provide guidance documents to meet those requirements. Once the initial screening is complete, the staff will begin an in-depth assessment to determine the project's feasibility, as in whether it can be completed on time and within budget, alignment with the Critical Minerals Infrastructure Fund objectives, including anticipated activities related to the infrastructure and critical mineral development, and how the applicant's interests may be impacted by these activities. The assessment will also include looking at the applicant's capacity to execute the grant-funded project. However, given the funding stream is meant to support capacity development, this element will be considered a lower priority in the assessment process. Once the approvals process is completed, the CMIF team will inform all applicants about funding decisions and will be available to answer any questions related to the process. If their proposal is approved, applicants will be invited to sign an agreement and provide transfer payment information. Costs must be incurred between when the agreement is signed and March 31st, 2026. Reporting will occur upon completion of the project or at the end of each year for multi-year projects. Recipients will not be required to submit an expense report, but any unused funds remaining at the end of the project will need to be returned to the department. Recipients will be required to report on the project's performance to highlight whether objectives were met, or in the case of multi-year projects, continue progressing towards being met. Natural Resources Canada staff will provide recipients with a standard performance reporting template to help them complete this process, and will be available to support them as necessary. In addition to the performance reporting, recipients may also be asked to complete an optional survey to help inform future calls for proposals. I will now pass it back to Catherine to wrap things up.
Thanks, Cody and Jeff, and thank you to all of our participants for your time today. I'd just like to remind you again of a couple of resources that you may consult, which are listed here, as well as the CMIF Indigenous Grants team. You can reach us by email.